Yeah,
Um,
it's always a process. I think you always need to be checking yourself and trying to improve. Yeah, even like right now, going into this 2023 season, I love the pitch clock. I think it's awesome. I think it was overdue. I think it's having a lot of good effect. It is affecting broadcasts. I had a small text thread with a handful of friends that are doing games at various levels at various places, and some are TV, some are radio, some are more pre-post. And I asked them, do you see an impact? And almost all of them said, yeah. You got to be tighter on your stories. You got to get to them earlier. You have to bow and get out of them sometimes more often. You might have to tell the same story more than once because there's so much ball and play action. You have to be more selective, and that's good. I think just like the players, I mean, they're the ones really competing, have to adjust playing the game. We have to make that same adjustment, and I think you always need to be aware of that.
I'm so glad you brought up pace of play and the pitch clock and how it's impacting like your profession at broadcasting, because I haven't watched too many spring training games yet this year, but I've seen the time total of like 220, 2 hours, 15 minutes. That's down a lot. Baseball is usually a 3-hour ordeal. And I feel like for so many like great broadcasters, it was kind of like what you're saying with the art of like telling great stories, great orators, like Vin Scully. Like, how do you think Vin Scully and his like way to tell stories and remember things, how do you think he would have fared with an 18-second pitch clock and you have to like, approach it from a different angle? Like that has to be hard and challenging for what you have to do.
I think honestly, for men of his generation, it's probably somewhat easy because he did it for so long that he worked in an era where that naturally happened. What the pitch clock is doing is making the game act like it did in the 70s, essentially, by pace of play. Like if you ever watch go watch an old game on YouTube, it's basically the pitch clock without the pitch clock, which is what this will be. I think it's already becoming that. Reds had back-to-back games on the weekend without a single violation between the two teams. It already kind of naturally has sunk into that rhythm. I would share with you, without naming names, that some of my mentors or those I look to for advice that are a generation or so older than me that have been doing this a long time at the big league level, when I asked them in advance of my first big league innings, what should I be thinking of? What should I be aware of? And I was kind of looking for like a go get them, you're great. I didn't hear that. Instead, I heard, John, the game sucks right now. It's really slow. Not a lot of stuff is happening. Have Phil. Be ready to either say nothing or to have something else to say because it's a long time between pitches. So I think for somebody like Mr. Scully, who's an all-timer, he would do great with anything. I almost think it would be more familiar, and I think it would be energizing. I think for us that came up with a slower brand, generally, even in the minors, I think on the whole, it's going to be a good thing because there are times where it truly was filler, like we're filling time. This is good. We know what we're losing. We're losing the hitter adjusting his gloves 17 times. We're losing the pitcher doing a giant circle around the mound, big sigh, shoulder slump. We're not losing anything. It's some ninth innings, yes, that can add and ratchet to some drama. But on the whole, we're gaining baseball. Real baseball moments are happening.
It's fascinating. You're right. I never even thought of it from that perspective, because you're right. That's all I know is 3-hour plus games. If it's 3 hours, that's like a light, like, oh wow, this thing really sped by. But so much of like the baseball, I remember because I watched a lot of Orioles games. It was like Gary Thorne and Jim Palmer. They're talking about an old Earl Weaver story, and they could probably get through 2 stories between pitches. Like it does take a long time. But like, how important is that aspect of the game, though? Like, obviously, balls and strikes is just a small part of it, but like being able to tee up your color analyst and be able to get in and out of stories, like that's probably as important as like, all right, 2 ball, 1 strike count.
Yes, I would say so. I think the number one thing that always has to be the priority is the game itself. People are watching for the game, what's happening in the game. And I think the brighter the spotlight we can shine on this incredible generation of players that are super athletic, super talented, very fun to watch, have dynamic personalities, is a good thing. What we're going to lose the extra replay of the home run. We're going to lose the coming back from break, showing a 20-second video of something or a still image and a longer narration bleeding into the at-bat. I don't think that's a big deal. I think we can still tell the stories. We just have to do it in a tighter fashion. Get to the meat faster. Make sure your preamble is spun and wound tightly, and have feel for and be watching the game. I think on the whole, it's just going to engage us in the game more. And I think the game is great. I think we have awesome talent playing this game right now. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have to adjust my mindset and get out of, long storytelling time. Because hey, sometimes when my favorite team is getting blown out, I'll stick around and watch the game, even if they're losing by 10, just to hear like what stories are being told. It's always it.
On TV, I think that's still going to happen too. Like, the Reds had an ugly game in this stage of spring where the opposing the pitching half innings for the Reds, the opposing offense, they were slugfests. It was long, laborious, a lot of guys on base, a lot of walks, and then the inverse was the opposite. The Reds were going quickly. On those days when your team is down, or your team announcer, your team's down 10 runs in the fifth inning, you don't need to say, it's TV. You don't need to say every pitch. If you want to use that opportunity to then tell a story that's totally unrelated to the game, that shows personality and that's exactly the time to do it. But you don't tell that story when it's a one-run game in the eighth, and it's just having that kind of feel. I think we're still going to have windows to do that. They just won't be as many, and there'll be more substance to them. They won't be fill as often. They'll actually be designed entertainment.